Good day, grade 12 students. My name is Moses Mbachazwa, and I'm here to present to you a lesson in life sciences. Welcome to Life Sciences Fun with Veggies. So, today we'll be discussing the topic of reproduction, right? So, what is reproduction? Reproduction is the topic of study that focuses on how organisms reproduce, right? So that is what reproduction is in essence. All organisms must reproduce to avoid extinction uh, of that particular species. Reproduction is a process where the two parent organism of the same species reproduce sexually and create a new organism. Right? Okay. So there are many subtopics under the topic of reproduction, and these are we can find the male and the female reproductive organs, right? We can find puberty, right? Some of you went through that when you were in your early teen years, right? In grade 7 or so, where you started experiencing changes in your voice. If you're a guy, you know, you became more muscular and so on. Gametogenesis, the menstrual cycle, fertilization and the development of zygote to glycost, im- implementation of glycost and gestation, right? So for the purposes of this lesson, we shall focus on the menstrual cycle, right? That's why it's highlighted in red there. Okay, so let's speak about the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle can be divided into two components, right? So it consists of the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle, right? So this is just a quick reminder of what a female reproductive organ looks like. So that is that. It looks like this. And uh, in particular, uh, you have to consider the location in which these two cycles happen, right? So the ovarian cycle will happen at the ovaries, right? At the ovary, right? And then the uterine cycle will happen at the uterus, right? So it's not that complicated. Even the names give you an idea of how to remember that. Okay, if I see ovarian cycle, I know that's the one that happens in the ovary, and uterine cycle, that's the one that happens in the uterus, right? Okay, so we're going to start with the ovarian cycle. We're going to start discussing the ovarian cycle. So the ovarian cycle explains the development to the release of an ovum or an egg, right? So an ovum, or we call it an ovum or an egg, right? So females carry an egg, the egg that needs to be fertilized by the sperm, so that an embryo or a fetus can be birthed from that, so that a baby can be formed, right? So this process takes place in the ovary, so that's the location. The process begins when the follicle stimulating hormone, the FSH, is secreted by the pituitary gland. So if you look at that figure there, over there, you look at that figure, your figure 2, right? That shows you precisely the ovarian cycle, okay? So it starts off by what? It starts off by us secreting the FSH, right, which is the follicle stimulating hormone, which contains, we stimulate the follicle, so the FSH gets secreted and stimulates the primary follicle, right? So this is the smaller egg, right? And then the primary follicle grows into a mature egg. Then the Graafican follicle develops, it produces a hormone, estrogen, increasing the estrogen levels in the blood. Then around day 14, the Graafican follicle ruptures and releases the ovum, and this process is called ovulation, right? Ovulation is stimulated by the luteinizing hormone, so it's very important to know the type of hormones, right, that are involved in all these processes. For example, in ovulation, there we have it there. So the luteinizing hormone is the one that is involved when it comes to ovulation, right? And then the luteinizing hormone causes the ruptured follicle to change into a structure called the corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum secretes a hormone, progesterone, increasing the level of progesterone in the blood, right? Then if fertilization does not take place, the corpus luteum shrinks and stops producing progesterone. Uh, the ovum passes down and the fallopian tubes, enters the uterus and leaves the body through menstruation. So it's important to note that if the ovum is fertilized, the corpus luteum remains active and continues secreting progesterone. Progesterone helps sustain the pregnancy by preventing uterine muscles from contracting and promoting the development of placenta and fetal tissues, right? So yeah, everything that is here has a function, right? So you'll see that the corpus luteum remains active if conception happens. So if fertilization happens, then we need it for it to produce progesterone, which has certain functions when it comes to pregnancy, right? Okay, then estrogen and progesterone produced by the ovaries during the ovarian cycle can influence the uterine cycle. So it now becomes important for us to understand what the uterine cycle is. Okay, so the uterine cycle shows the changes that occur in the uterus wall gradually thickening and becoming more vascular over a period of 28 days. Let us explore this menstrual cycle in detail. So this one is important because ladies would know better, right? Every month they go through a process called menstruation, right? So in menstruation, the exact thing that is happening is the lining of the uterus, right? The uterus wall, which we call the endometrium, right, becomes thickened. And the purpose of this is for it to be able to support, or rather, for when the fertilized egg, right, comes and sits on the wall of the uterus, right? And then that's where the baby or the fetus will get proper nutrients and so on being transported to it, right? So yeah, the process of menstruation can be broken down into these 4 steps. So we can have the endometrium wall breaking down. We call that menstruation. That lasts for 4 to 7 days. The endometrium is stimulated by estrogen to become thicker and develop more blood vessels and glands. Progesterone stimulates the endometrium to become even thicker, and this happens in preparation for the possible implementation of the fertilized ovum. So this is what I was saying, right? That's the purpose of the walls becoming thicker, right? And then if fertilization does not occur, then the endometrium tears away, resulting in menstruation. So yeah, so with girls, if they get pregnant, they don't see their periods, right? But as long as they are not getting pregnant, I'm not saying they should get pregnant, but I'm just saying, right, that for the older people who are in a much older state in their life, once they get pregnant, they start missing periods, right? But you are school learners, you are not there yet in life, so you keep on seeing your period every month, right? Okay, then that's a sort of like a nice picture clock that shows you the process of menstruation. So it could happen in this 7 days, right? The menstrual cycle. So that's basically the endometrium wall breaking down, right? And then in result of blood, right? Okay, so another issue that we might have to discuss in relation to the topic that we're doing is what we call contraceptive methods, okay? So contraceptive methods are methods that are used to prevent unintended pregnancies. So that is the whole purpose of contraceptive methods, right? So I'll just name a few because I believe that you guys are school learners and you're not at a stage yet where you should be planning to have kids or and so on and so on, right? So these are the most common, some of the contraceptive methods. But let me start with number 4 out of my list. So if you look at number 4 speaks about abstinence, right? This is probably one of the best contraceptive methods for people in your age group, because the problem with contraceptives is that some of them, although they can prevent, let's say, pregnancy, some of them will not be able to prevent like other things such as sexual transmitted diseases, right? So there's a give and take. But if you abstain for any sexual intercourse, for example, you avoid pregnancy and any other complications that might come as a result of engaging in sexual activity. That is, For example, you avoid pregnancy, you avoid sexual transmitted diseases. And why is it important for you guys to avoid pregnancy? It's important because uh, having a child comes with financial implications. And if you're not ready at this point in your life, it then becomes a challenge, right? So I would say, out of the list that I've given, abstinence would be the one that I would say is the best for school learners. But you also have something called the calendar method, right? So the calendar method, or you can call it the rhythmic method, this is a method that involves tracking the menstrual cycle over several months to identify the fertile window, right? So couples avoid intercourse during the days when ovulation would have occurred. So I don't know if I mentioned, but if we go up here in the ovarian cycle, right, uh, you have your primary follicle, and then it grows to be a Graafian follicle, right? And then when it's a mature Graafian follicle, right, it ruptures open. So it opens up and it releases what we call an ovum, right? So that ovum is what gets fertilized, right, by the sperm, right? So if you read point number 3 there, you will see that it says around day 14, the Graafian follicle ruptures and releases an ovum. And then the process is called ovulation. So the reason why I'm saying that is to show you that use this method, that's what they do. They track when ovulation would have possibly occurred. And then they avoid having sexual intercourse, the couple, that is, so that to avoid fertilization, right? Conception, right? So that's one. Then another popular one that you probably have heard of is what we call contraceptive pills. So these are pills that I think it's mostly with females that they drink to avoid the risk of conception. There's also contraceptive needles that they might use, injections that birth control needles that they might inject themselves to avoid the possibility of conception. We also have condoms, right? Condoms, there are two types. You have condoms for females and for males, right? And then the male condoms are ones that you put externally. That is one you would erect on, not erect, apologize for that. What I meant to say is one that one would put over an erected penis, right? And then the other female condoms are inserted inside the vagina before intercourse, right? So you've got both condoms for males and females. Yes. So yeah. So just to give you some information on this topic. So we discussed what reproduction is. We discussed the menstrual cycle. That the menstrual cycle is composed of the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle, right? And then at the end, we just spoke about a couple of contraceptive methods. So it then becomes important to know the terminology, right? In life science, we have a lot of scientific terms that we deal with, right? So we spoke about the endometrium wall here. We spoke about the FSH, the different type of hormones, FSH, the LH, right? I think we also spoke about the follicle, right? The primary follicle, the Graafian follicle, the ovum. So it becomes important for you to know the specific wording, right? Because in an exam or a test, they're gonna say these words. So it's important for you to know specifically the scientific terms, right? So yes, so in this lesson that we have done, that were the concepts that we're going to discuss. I hope it made sense. And just keep on working hard, and I know that you're going to do well. Thank you so much. Goodbye.